Jasper Reynolds sits in his private jet's bathroom, vomiting violently after eating the first-class meal. Flight attendant Whitney knocks, asking if he's okay. Jasper emerges, phone in hand, already texting his assistant. "I now own 51% of Horizon Airlines. Fire everyone." Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever experienced terrible service while traveling. The next 9 minutes will show you how one man's horrible flight experience transformed an entire industry. Jasper Reynolds wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. At 43, the CEO of Reynolds Innovations stood as living proof that determination could overcome the harshest circumstances. Growing up in Chicago's South Side, Jasper witnessed firsthand how poverty and systemic discrimination formed nearly insurmountable barriers for Black children with dreams bigger than their zip code allowed. His mother, Gabriella, a hospital janitor working double shifts, sacrificed everything to keep her gifted son focused on education rather than the gang violence claiming his neighbors. Their apartment might have been small, with peeling paint and unreliable heating, but it housed mountains of library books and secondhand computers Jasper constantly disassembled and rebuilt. By 16, Jasper had already created his first primitive artificial intelligence program using scrapped parts and borrowed internet connections. His exceptional talents didn't go unnoticed. MIT offered him a full scholarship after his revolutionary coding algorithm won the national science competition, beating privileged students from elite private schools with unlimited resources. College presented new challenges. Despite his intellectual brilliance, Jasper found himself constantly having to prove he belonged in spaces dominated by wealthy white students. Professors confused him with the only other Black student in class. Study groups mysteriously filled up before he could join, but these obstacles only fueled his determination. After graduation, when venture capitalists dismissed his revolutionary AI concept, Jasper bootstrapped his company from a tiny apartment, surviving on ramen noodles and determination. Reynolds Innovations' breakthrough came when his adaptive learning algorithm revolutionized medical diagnostics, saving thousands of lives and catching the attention of major hospitals nationwide. 5 years later, his company valuation hit $1 billion. At 10 years, $50 billion. Today, Reynolds Innovations stood as the global leader in artificial intelligence applications, with offices spanning 6 continents and technology embedded in everything from smartphones to surgical robots. Yet wealth hadn't insulated Jasper from discrimination. If anything, it highlighted society's deep-seated biases in new, painful ways. Luxury car dealerships still followed him around showrooms, assuming he couldn't afford the vehicles. Realtors mysteriously claimed penthouses were sold when he inquired, but showed the same properties to white colleagues days later. Exclusive restaurants lost his reservations while accommodating white walk-ins. The Meridian Club incident particularly stung. Despite his 9-figure donation to their charity foundation, the prestigious country club rejected his membership application, citing cultural fit concerns. The same month, they accepted 3 white executives with significantly smaller net worths. These experiences shaped Jasper's business philosophy: excellence without exception, and zero tolerance for incompetence masked as discrimination. His employees represented diverse backgrounds, but shared one quality: exceptional competence. Those who delivered results received unparalleled compensation and loyalty. Those who failed faced swift dismissal, regardless of connections or circumstances. His germophobia complicated matters further. At 8, Jasper nearly died from food poisoning after eating contaminated school lunch. The poorest kids always served last, often receiving the oldest, least fresh options. 2 weeks in intensive care left him with a compromised immune system and pathological attention to cleanliness. His offices featured hospital-grade air filtration. His private chef followed strict food safety protocols. His personal jet maintained immaculate conditions, which made today's predicament particularly unbearable. A critical mechanical issue discovered during routine maintenance had grounded his Gulfstream G650. With back-to-back meetings scheduled across the country, Jasper reluctantly agreed to fly commercial, Horizon Airlines' premier first-class service specifically. The Horizon Celestial experience is comparable to private aviation, his assistant Sharon claimed, scrolling through promotional materials on her tablet. Their first-class cabins feature private suites, dedicated attendants, and chef-prepared meals. Your profile has been flagged for VIP treatment. Jasper remained skeptical. I haven't flown commercial in 15 years, Sharon. Their safety and cleanliness ratings are impeccable, she continued. And they've recently won awards for customer service excellence. Fine. Book it, Jasper conceded. But have the jet ready immediately after maintenance. I'm not making a habit of this. Sharon paused, concern evident in her expression. Just remember, commercial aviation isn't catered to individuals like private flying. The experience might be different. Different indeed. Arriving at the premium check-in counter, the agent barely glanced up before directing Jasper to economy check-in despite his first-class ticket. Only after his firm insistence did she reluctantly verify his reservation, offering no apology for the mistake. The VIP lounge presented another hurdle. Despite scanning his platinum membership card, the attendant blocked his entry. "I'm sorry, sir, but this lounge is for first-class passengers and platinum members only," she stated, eyeing his expensive suit with suspicion. "I am both," Jasper responded calmly, sliding his boarding pass across the counter. "First class, seat 1A. And you just scanned my platinum card. I'll need to see ID verification," she insisted. Something Jasper noticed she hadn't requested from the white businessman who entered moments before. This scene had played repeatedly throughout his life, constantly proving he belonged in spaces where his presence was considered anomalous. The childhood museum field trip where security singled him out. The college campus police stopping him weekly while walking to the library. The time police detained him while showing clients his new corporate headquarters, assuming he was trespassing. Even with billions in his accounts, the world still saw his skin first, his humanity second, and his accomplishments as suspicious anomalies rather than earned success. Boarding began precisely on schedule, one feature of Horizon Airlines that their marketing proudly promoted. Jasper approached the priority lane, first-class ticket prominently displayed. The gate agent, a middle-aged woman named Brenda, according to her nameplate, barely glanced at his boarding pass before waving him through without the customary "enjoy your flight" she'd offered to previous passengers. Inside the aircraft, flight attendant Whitney Cameron's practiced smile faltered momentarily upon seeing Jasper. At 34, Whitney had served Horizon's elite cabin for 8 years, priding herself on anticipating the needs of distinguished travelers, primarily white executives and occasional celebrities who fit her preconceived notion of success. "Seat?" she asked curtly, despite his boarding pass clearly showing 1A, the premier location in the aircraft's nose. 1A, Jasper replied evenly, maintaining his composure despite the obvious differential treatment. Whitney's internal monologue raced as she reluctantly gestured toward the front suite. Another one of those trying to look important in a nice suit. Probably used points or got upgraded somehow. The real first-class regulars know me by name. As Jasper settled into his spacious seat, carefully wiping the surfaces with antibacterial cloth, he overheard Whitney whispering to another attendant, Carlton, by the galley. "Suite 1A doesn't look like our usual clientele," she murmured, not realizing the cabin's excellent acoustics carried her words. "You know how these people buy expensive clothes, thinking it makes them belong." Carlton chuckled. "Last month we had one trying to order drinks before even sitting down. Had to explain what after takeoff means." Jasper discreetly activated his phone's recording app, documenting every interaction while outwardly appearing absorbed in his tablet's content. His successful navigation of predominantly white corporate America had taught him the importance of evidence. Memories could be denied, recordings couldn't. Captain Philip Bennett's voice crackled over the intercom, welcoming passengers aboard Horizon's flagship service to San Francisco. After the standard announcements, Bennett emerged from the cockpit, personally greeting first-class passengers, a Horizon tradition. "Mr. Thompson, wonderful to see you again." He nodded warmly to 2A, a silver-haired investment banker. "Mrs. Keller, we've stocked your favorite champagne." He winked at 3A. When reaching Jasper, the captain merely nodded stiffly before returning to the cockpit. No name acknowledgement despite the manifest clearly showing his information. Pre-departure beverages arrived, with Jasper receiving his significantly after others despite sitting closest to the galley. The pattern continued after takeoff as meal service began. Whitney methodically served each first-class passenger, starting from the back and working forward, the opposite of standard protocol. Jasper, despite occupying 1A, received attention last. "Today's main course options are beef tenderloin or sea bass," Whitney announced as she finally reached his suite. "I'll have the beef, please," Jasper responded. "My profile notes my seafood allergy." Whitney's expression tightened. "We don't track passenger preferences that specifically." "My assistant confirmed it was noted when booking," Jasper countered calmly. "Severe shellfish and fish allergy, Class 4 reaction risk." "Let me check," Whitney replied without apology, returning moments later with a covered plate. "This is the beef option." Jasper waited until she departed before carefully inspecting his meal, a habit formed through necessity. The tenderloin appeared properly cooked, but the accompanying bread showed unmistakable blue-green spots beneath the butter. The vegetable medley emitted a slightly sour odor typical of produce past its prime. He carefully scraped the butter away, hoping the bread beneath might be salvageable, but the mold had penetrated deeply. The first cautious bite of meat revealed a rancid undertaste masked by heavy seasoning. Clearly food improperly stored or beyond its safe consumption date. Within minutes, his stomach cramped violently. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead as nausea surged. Jasper barely reached the lavatory before vomiting explosively, his body rejecting the contaminated food. Between painful heaves, terrible memories resurfaced. Hospital rooms, IV drips, doctors discussing his chances as though he couldn't hear them. A knock interrupted his misery. "Sir, is everything okay in there?" Whitney's voice carried artificial concern. "Fine," Jasper managed, splashing cold water on his face while simultaneously reaching for his phone. The cabin's supposed tranquility had just become a battlefield, and Jasper Reynolds never entered wars unprepared. As Jasper leaned against the bathroom wall, his fingers flew across his phone screen despite the violent nausea still gripping his body. He wasn't just texting, he was executing a business maneuver that would reshape the aviation industry within minutes. "Initiate Operation Icarus. Authorization code Victor 9 Delta. Target, Horizon Airlines. Parameters, controlling interest. Timeline, immediate." Those simple instructions activated a financial strike team that had stood ready for months. Jasper's chief investment officer, Victor, immediately diverted resources from 3 different investment pools, while his legal team prepared the necessary filings. His head of operations deployed algorithms specifically designed to acquire public company shares during volatile market conditions. Have you ever wondered what power truly looks like in the modern world? It's not always visible or loud. Sometimes it's quiet, strategic, and executed through smartphone screens at 35,000 feet. If you've ever felt powerless against poor treatment, give this video a like and subscribe to see how one man changed the rules of the game. 6 months earlier, Jasper had considered acquiring Horizon Airlines as part of his transportation portfolio diversification. His team had completed comprehensive due diligence, financial statements, operational assessments, corporate culture evaluations, customer satisfaction metrics. The company showed strong fundamentals but suffered from leadership issues and inconsistent service quality. Their CEO, Lawrence Patterson, runs it like a private club rather than a public service, his analyst reported. Strong profit margins, but customer complaints are systematically buried. Flight crews operate with minimal oversight. Jasper ultimately passed on the acquisition, focusing instead on emerging technology investments. But he hadn't discarded the research or the acquisition plan. His team maintained a dormant strategy for purchasing controlling interest in Horizon if circumstances warranted. Today, those circumstances had arrived with a side of moldy bread. His phone vibrated with incoming messages. Initial share block acquired. 17%. Secondary purchase complete. Plus 12%. Board Chairman Albert Wesley notified of potential change in control. Stock price rising with unusual volume. Strategic reserve deployed. Additional 22% secured through institutional investors. Final position, 51.3% ownership confirmed. Regulatory filings underway. The entire process took exactly 9 minutes, the culmination of algorithms, relationships, and financial infrastructure built precisely for such opportunities. Jasper Reynolds now controlled Horizon Airlines. He immediately initiated a direct call to Albert Wesley, Horizon's board chairman. "Albert, Jasper Reynolds here." "Mr. Reynolds?" The confusion in Wesley's voice was evident. "This is unexpected. How can I help you?" "I've just acquired controlling interest in Horizon Airlines." Silence stretched for several seconds. "That's impossible. We would have been notified of any substantial..." "Check your trading alerts, Albert. The notification should be arriving now." Another pause, followed by audible gasping. "Good God, this is unprecedented. May I ask why?" "I'm currently on Horizon Flight 457 to San Francisco, in first class, where I was just served moldy food by a crew that has demonstrated clear bias since I boarded. I'm having a severe reaction to contaminated food despite my allergy being noted in your system." "Mr. Reynolds, I assure you this isn't representative of..." "Save it, Albert. I've made 2 decisions. First, the entire crew of this flight is terminated, effective immediately upon landing. Second, CEO Lawrence Patterson is suspended pending review. I'll expect you at SFO to handle the logistics personally. Firing an entire crew is highly unusual and potentially problematic with the union. I own the company, Albert. Make it happen or join them in unemployment. My team will send detailed instructions shortly." Jasper ended the call and returned to his seat, outwardly composed despite his churning stomach. The transformation was immediate and palpable. Whitney noticed his changed demeanor, the subtle shift from polite passenger to something altogether more formidable. She approached with uncharacteristic attentiveness. "Sir, can I get you anything? Perhaps some seltzer water for your stomach?" "No, thank you," Jasper replied coldly, not meeting her gaze. The cockpit phone rang, drawing Carlton to answer. Passengers wouldn't have noticed anything unusual, but Jasper observed the micro-expressions of shock as the attendant listened to whatever message was being relayed. Carlton's eyes widened, darting toward Jasper with newfound recognition and unmistakable fear. Hushed, urgent whispers spread among the crew. Whitney's complexion paled as Carlton pulled her aside, gesturing subtly toward Jasper while conveying information that transformed her expression from dismissive to terrified. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, professionally detached but with an undercurrent of tension. "Cabin crew, prepare for immediate arrival procedures." What authority did these people think they wielded? Comment number 1 if you believe service workers should treat everyone with respect regardless of appearance. Do you think Whitney deserved what was coming? Would you have handled the situation differently than Jasper? The atmosphere on that plane was about to get a lot more tense. Captain Bennett emerged briefly from the cockpit, attempting eye contact with Jasper, who deliberately focused on his tablet. The remaining flight proceeded in awkward silence, the crew now hyper-aware of their previously dismissed passenger. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco International Airport, Jasper noted how the standard landing announcements seemed rushed, mechanical. The usual practiced warmth had evaporated, replaced by an atmosphere of mounting dread. No one yet understood the full magnitude of what awaited them at the gate, but they would. Very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Francisco International Airport. Local time is 2:17 p.m. with clear skies and 74 degrees. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened until the captain turns off the fasten seatbelt sign. Whitney's voice lacked its usual practiced melody as she delivered the arrival announcement. Her eyes kept darting toward Jasper, who sat impassively reviewing documents on his tablet. The aircraft taxied to the gate with unusual speed, suggesting priority handling not typically afforded even to premium flights. Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at Gate C12. You may now use your cellular devices. We ask that you please remain seated momentarily to allow our ground staff to complete arrival procedures. Passengers exchanged confused glances. Standard protocol involved immediate disembarkation, particularly for first-class travelers. Captain Bennett's voice soon replaced Whitney's, sounding notably strained. Folks, we apologize for the slight delay. We'll have you on your way momentarily. Our first-class passengers in Suites 1B through 3D are welcome to deplane now. The curious omission of Suite 1A, Jasper's seat, wasn't lost on nearby passengers, who cast inquisitive glances his way as they collected their belongings. Within minutes, the first-class cabin emptied, followed by business class and eventually economy passengers, leaving only Jasper and the increasingly anxious crew. Whitney approached hesitantly. Mr. Reynolds, can I get you anything while we wait? No, thank you, Jasper replied without looking up. I believe we all know what's coming next. Before Whitney could respond, the aircraft door reopened, admitting a procession of somber-faced individuals in corporate attire. Leading them was a silver-haired man in his 60s, Albert Wesley, Horizon's board chairman, followed by various executives clutching tablets and looking distinctly uncomfortable. Mr. Reynolds, Wesley approached, extending his hand. On behalf of Horizon Airlines, I want to personally apologize for your experience today. Jasper stood, ignoring the outstretched hand. Where is Patterson? CEO Patterson is en route from headquarters. His helicopter landed 2 minutes ago. As if on cue, Lawrence Patterson burst through the aircraft door, breathless and disheveled despite his expensive suit. At 58, Patterson had cultivated an image of distinguished authority through country club memberships and political connections rather than operational excellence. Mr. Reynolds, Patterson attempted his most charming smile, extending his hand. What an honor to have you aboard. Had you known I was black? Jasper interrupted coldly. Or had you known I was wealthy? Because your staff seemed quite clear on the former and oblivious to the latter. Patterson's smile faltered. I assure you, we treat all our premium passengers with the utmost. Gather your flight crew. Jasper cut him off again. Everyone, now. Captain Bennett had already assembled the cabin crew near the galley. Whitney stood slightly apart, her earlier confidence replaced by evident anxiety as she nervously twisted her wedding ring. Ladies and gentlemen, Wesley addressed the crew. This is Jasper Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Innovations, and as of approximately 30 minutes ago, the majority shareholder of Horizon Airlines. The announcement sent visible shockwaves through the group. Whitney's face drained of color, while Captain Bennett's professional facade crumbled into naked alarm. What none of you bothered to learn, Wesley continued, is that Mr. Reynolds holds the highest loyalty status possible with Horizon. His profile explicitly notes severe food allergies, and yet today, he was served contaminated food after experiencing what appears to be systematic discriminatory treatment. Jasper stepped forward, his voice calm but radiating authority. I grew up with severe immunodeficiency following childhood illness. Food contamination isn't merely unpleasant for me, it's potentially life-threatening. This fact was prominently noted in my passenger profile, which apparently none of you bothered to review. He turned toward Whitney directly. The moldy bread and spoiled food you served me has caused a reaction that will likely require medical attention. But beyond the physical impact, I'm more concerned about the pattern of behavior demonstrated by this crew from the moment I boarded. Jasper activated his tablet, which projected a series of video clips onto the cabin wall. Whitney's whispered comments about these people, Carlton's dismissive laughter, Captain Bennett's selective personal greetings. I document everything, Jasper explained. A habit developed through necessity navigating spaces where people who look like me aren't expected to belong. Whitney stepped forward, trembling slightly. Mr. Reynolds, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We had no idea who you were. That's precisely the problem, Jasper cut her off. You shouldn't need to know who I am to provide safe, respectful service. The fact that you're now terrified because I have power rather than remorseful about your actions speaks volumes. Captain Bennett attempted damage control. Sir, on behalf of the crew, I offer our sincere apologies. If you'd allow us to make this right, I've already decided how this will be made right, Jasper replied evenly. Mr. Wesley, please proceed. Wesley cleared his throat uncomfortably. Effective immediately, the entire flight crew of Horizon Flight 457 is terminated for gross negligence, food safety violations, and behavior inconsistent with company values. Protests erupted immediately. You can't fire an entire crew over one incident, Carlton objected. This is clearly retaliatory, Whitney added, suddenly finding her voice. We have union protections. Actually, one of the executives interjected. Serving contaminated food constitutes gross negligence, which supersedes standard union protections. The documentary evidence of discriminatory behavior provides additional grounds for immediate termination. Lawrence Patterson, sensing his own precarious position, attempted to distance himself from the situation. Mr. Reynolds, I assure you this isolated incident doesn't reflect Horizon's values or training protocols. These individuals clearly failed to uphold our standards, and their dismissal is absolutely warranted. Jasper turned his attention to Patterson, eyes narrowing. Don't insult my intelligence, Lawrence. You've created this culture. My team has already accessed internal communications, showing you've buried similar complaints for years. Your food safety protocols are criminally negligent, and your bias training is non-existent. He turned to Wesley. Patterson is suspended, effective immediately pending full investigation. My team will appoint an interim CEO by morning. Patterson's face contorted with rage. You can't just walk in and, I own 51% of this airline, Jasper interrupted calmly. I can and I have. Security will escort you from the premises. Your access to all company systems has already been revoked. As security personnel led the shocked crew and suspended CEO away, Whitney made a final, desperate appeal. This is discrimination. You can't fire people just because you're rich and powerful. Jasper regarded her coldly. No, Whitney. Discrimination is what you practice today. This is consequence. The story broke within hours. Aviation blogs published the first reports, quickly followed by mainstream business publications and eventually national news networks. Headlines varied dramatically depending on the outlet's perspective. Tech billionaire acquires airline mid-flight, fires entire crew after receiving moldy food. Jasper Reynolds takes dramatic action against alleged discrimination on commercial flight. Horizon Airlines in turmoil after hostile takeover by Reynolds Innovations CEO. Fired flight attendant claims racial retaliation after billionaire purchases airline. Horizon Airlines' stock experienced dramatic volatility, initially plummeting 17% on news of the unexpected leadership change and potential scandal, then stabilizing and actually gaining 3% after Reynolds Innovations issued a statement outlining a comprehensive transformation plan for the carrier. Whitney Cameron became the self-appointed spokesperson for the terminated crew, appearing on multiple news programs to present their version of events. We provided standard service to Mr. Reynolds like any other passenger, she insisted during one cable news interview, tears strategically forming. We had no idea who he was. Then suddenly, he buys the airline and fires us all. How is that not an abuse of power? The interviewer pressed further. Mr. Reynolds claims he recorded evidence of discriminatory comments and differential treatment. How do you respond? Taken completely out of context, Whitney countered. In a high-stress environment like aviation, crew members often use humor to cope. Nothing we said was meant maliciously. Public opinion fragmented along predictable lines. Some viewed Jasper as exercising justified consequences for discriminatory treatment he documented meticulously. Others saw an entitled billionaire exacting disproportionate revenge for minor service issues. Social media exploded with hashtags. Team Jasper and hashtag Justice for Whitney trended simultaneously, often accompanied by heated debates about wealth, power, race, and accountability. Meanwhile, Jasper himself had been transported directly from the aircraft to Stanford Medical Center, where doctors confirmed food poisoning complicated by his pre-existing immune condition. His emergency admission occurred away from media attention, with hospital staff unaware of the unfolding corporate drama. Sharon maintained vigilant watch by his bedside while simultaneously coordinating the massive operational changes underway at Horizon Airlines. "The board has ratified your emergency appointments," she informed him, tablet in hand. "Eliza Washington from JetBlue accepted the interim CEO position. The transition team has full access to all systems." Jasper nodded weakly, IV fluids dripping steadily into his arm. "What's the public narrative?" "Mixed, as expected. The crew is playing victim, claiming you overreacted. About 40% of public sentiment initially favored them until... Until what?" Sharon's expression shifted to grim satisfaction. "Until we released the findings from the preliminary investigation. The moldy food wasn't an isolated incident, Jasper. My team discovered a pattern of similar complaints systematically buried by management." She handed him her tablet displaying internal Horizon emails. Multiple passenger complaints about food safety, disproportionately from passengers with non-Anglo names, had been flagged with instructions to resolve without documentation, or provide standard compensation without incident report. "There's more," Sharon continued. "We accessed flight attendant performance evaluations. Crew members received higher ratings for what management termed passenger selection skills, essentially profiling customers who deserve premium service based on appearance and perceived status." Jasper's expression hardened despite his weakened state. "Lawrence Patterson? His fingerprints are everywhere. He personally authorized the suppression of 27 food safety complaints in the past year alone, and we found this in his email drafts folder." Sharon displayed another document, talking points for managing Jasper's complaint if he had followed standard procedures instead of acquiring the company. The draft contained phrases like isolated incident, no pattern of negligence, and standard compensation package, essentially the corporate version of a brush-off. "He never intended to take this seriously," Jasper observed. "There's one more thing you should see." Sharon pulled up social media footage that had begun circulating widely. Dozens of passengers sharing similar experiences of discriminatory treatment on Horizon flights, particularly in premium cabins. A black female surgeon described being repeatedly asked if she was in the correct line during priority boarding. A Middle Eastern physics professor recounted flight attendants watching him suspiciously throughout his flight. An Asian American executive detailed being served visibly inferior meals compared to white passengers seated nearby. The collective evidence transformed the narrative. Media outlets that had initially questioned Jasper's response began publishing investigative pieces about Horizon's corporate culture. Aviation authorities announced a formal investigation into food safety protocols across the airline's operations. By evening, Whitney's media appearances abruptly ceased as journalists uncovered her involvement in previous passenger complaints. Public opinion shifted dramatically, with polls showing over 70% now supporting Jasper's actions. From his hospital bed, Jasper drafted a company-wide message to all remaining Horizon employees. "Today marks a new beginning for Horizon Airlines. Excellence isn't negotiable, safety isn't optional, and respect isn't selective based on appearance, background, or perceived status. Those unwilling or unable to uphold these fundamental principles have no place in our organization. Those committed to these values will find unprecedented support and opportunity in the transformed company we're building together." The message, sent under interim CEO Washington's signature, received overwhelming positive response from employees who had long recognized the toxic elements within the company culture, but lacked the power to effect change. As Jasper drifted into medically induced sleep that night, the foundations of a transformed Horizon Airlines were already taking shape, built upon the ashes of entrenched discrimination he'd experienced his entire life, now finally confronted with consequences proportional to the offense. 2 weeks after the incident, Jasper sat in a private conference room overlooking San Francisco Bay. Fully recovered physically, but still processing the magnitude of what his investigation had uncovered. Around the table sat his elite investigative team, former FBI agents, forensic accountants, aviation safety experts, and civil rights attorneys, assembled to excavate the full extent of Horizon Airlines' dysfunctional culture. Have you ever wondered what really happens behind the scenes at major companies when no one's watching? If you believe corporations should be held accountable for systematic discrimination, hit that like button and subscribe to see the full investigation unfold. Comment number 1. If you've ever experienced poor treatment while flying that you suspect was based on your appearance. The pattern extends back 7 years, explained Meredith Donovan, lead investigator and former Department of Justice prosecutor. Coinciding precisely with Lawrence Patterson's appointment as CEO, she displayed a timeline on the room's main screen showing complaint rates by demographic categories. Passengers of color flying in premium cabins filed complaints at 4 times the rate of white passengers. Those complaints were resolved at half the rate, with significantly lower compensation. Jasper leaned forward. And the food safety issues? Robert Chen, the forensic accountant, took over. We've identified a troubling cost-cutting measure implemented in year 2 of Patterson's tenure. First-class meal preparation was outsourced to a subsidiary secretly owned by Patterson's brother-in-law. Health inspection records show 17 violations in the past 3 years, all administratively dismissed through connections at the local regulatory agency. But here's where it gets truly disturbing, added Terrence Washington, aviation safety specialist. We've found evidence of a tiered food safety protocol based on passenger profiles. Premium meals were prepared and stored differently depending on passenger categorization. Jasper's expression darkened. Categorization based on what criteria? They called it the Patterson Priority Index, Terrence explained, displaying an internal document. Passengers receive scores based on their perceived value to the airline. Frequent white male business travelers received the highest ratings. Corporate travelers of color were consistently downgraded despite identical flying patterns. The algorithm explicitly incorporated racial and gender factors under the euphemism, customer relationship potential. This affected everything from meal freshness to wine selection, Meredith added. Whitney Cameron appears frequently in commendation reports for her skill in distributing premium options according to this system. The revelations continued mounting. Jasper's team had hired independent investigators to interview former employees, revealing a culture where discriminatory behavior wasn't merely tolerated, but tacitly rewarded. Flight crews received bonuses for passenger satisfaction metrics heavily weighted toward feedback from white male executives. We've identified 47 former employees who attempted to report concerns, Robert noted. 42 were terminated within 6 months on unrelated pretexts. The remaining 5 were transferred to undesirable routes until they resigned. Perhaps most damning were the whistleblower testimonies now flooding in from current and former staff. Encouraged by the leadership change and confidentiality guarantees, employees revealed systematic discrimination that extended far beyond Jasper's experience. Whitney Cameron's personnel file contains 5 previous complaints from passengers of color, Meredith reported, all buried through Patterson's direct intervention. Her performance reviews praise her for understanding passenger prioritization and maintaining cabin hierarchy, their euphemisms for discriminatory service. The investigation expanded beyond Horizon's corporate boundaries when the FDA became involved, triggered by anonymous reports from kitchen staff. Health inspectors descended on the airline's catering facilities, discovering widespread violations including inadequate refrigeration, expired ingredients, and alarming cross-contamination issues. The contaminated meal you received wasn't accidental, Terrence concluded grimly. Based on witness testimonies and documentation, meals for certain low-priority passengers were deliberately prepared with older ingredients nearing expiration dates. Jasper processed this information silently, the full weight of its implications settling heavily. What he'd experienced wasn't merely casual discrimination, but a systematized protocol explicitly designed to provide inferior and potentially dangerous service to passengers based partly on race. Meanwhile, Lawrence Patterson had not accepted his suspension quietly. Sharon entered the conference room with urgent news about his counteractions. Patterson is attempting to bribe investigators, she reported. He's offered substantial payments to 2 FDA inspectors and reached out to 3 former employees with hush money. Our surveillance team documented all interactions. More concerning, she continued, he's pressuring board members to challenge your acquisition. He's claiming market manipulation and threatening lawsuits. Jasper remained unfazed. His threats are meaningless. Our acquisition was completely legal, if unconventional in timing. There's one more thing, Sharon added hesitantly. Whitney Cameron has filed a wrongful termination lawsuit alleging racial discrimination against you specifically. She claims you fired her for being white. The room fell momentarily silent before Jasper responded with unexpected calmness. Good. Discovery works both ways. This gives us additional legal channels to expose everything they've done. As the meeting concluded, Jasper authorized expanding the investigation further. I want everything documented with unassailable evidence. This isn't just about one airline or one flight crew. This is about establishing consequences for systemic discrimination that typically goes unpunished. The team dispersed with renewed purpose, understanding that this investigation had evolved beyond corporate takeover into something approaching justice. For Jasper, the evidence confirmed what he'd always known. His experience wasn't isolated or imagined, but part of deliberate systems designed to maintain hierarchies while providing plausible deniability. Most disturbing was the realization that without his exceptional resources and position, these practices would have continued unabated, dismissed as isolated incidents rather than recognized as the systematic discrimination they truly were. What would happen when the full investigation became public? Would the fired crew members face the consequences of their actions, or would they find a way to spin the narrative in their favor? The battle for truth was just beginning. Lawrence Patterson maintained an impressive corner office in a private executive club overlooking Central Park. Once his power center for running Horizon Airlines, it now served as headquarters for his counteroffensive against Jasper Reynolds. 3 weeks after his suspension, Patterson had assembled a coalition of former executives, media contacts, and political allies determined to reclaim control of their airline. The narrative is gaining traction, announced Heather Davis, the crisis management consultant Patterson had retained at $1,500 per hour. We've successfully positioned this as a billionaire's vindictive overreaction rather than legitimate corporate governance. Around the mahogany conference table sat the core members of what they dubbed Operation Restoration. Whitney Cameron and Carlton Thomas represented the fired crew. Bradley Wilson, Horizon's former head of public relations. Senator James Harrison, whose campaigns Patterson had generously funded. And Marcus Littleton, a conservative media personality whose private aviation needs Patterson had accommodated with complimentary upgrades for years. The public has a limited attention span, Heather continued, displaying social media analytics on her laptop. Our messaging about elitist billionaire versus working-class flight attendants is resonating with key demographics. Whitney's appearances have generated significant sympathy. Whitney nodded, adjusting her carefully selected outfit, conservative yet approachable, designed by Heather's stylists to project wholesome professionalism. I've received thousands of supportive messages. People understand that one bad day shouldn't end careers built over decades. What remained strategically unmentioned was how her media appearances carefully avoided addressing the documented discriminatory comments or food safety violations. Instead, she portrayed herself as a dedicated aviation professional blindsided by a powerful man's wounded ego. Reynolds has the evidence advantage, Bradley cautioned. His recordings are damaging, especially with FDA now involved. Which is why we're attacking his character rather than disputing specific allegations, Heather replied. Marcus has been particularly effective on this front. The media personality smiled coldly. My viewers respond to stories about coastal elites using their wealth to bully ordinary Americans. I've devoted 3 segments to portraying Reynolds as embodying everything wrong with billionaire privilege. These segments carefully avoided mentioning race explicitly while using coded language and visual framing that primed viewers to see Jasper as threatening and unreasonable. The strategy relied on activating unconscious biases without crossing lines that might trigger discrimination complaints. The boycott campaign against Reynolds Innovations products is gaining momentum, Bradley added. Several conservative consumer groups have joined, and we're seeing hashtag engagement increase by 47% this week. Patterson nodded approvingly. And the legal front? Whitney's wrongful termination lawsuit provides excellent cover, replied Victor Schultz, the attorney specializing in corporate disputes. It keeps Reynolds on defense while we work on the larger strategy. That larger strategy represented Patterson's true endgame, orchestrating a hostile takeover of Reynolds Innovations itself. While publicly positioning himself as the wronged party seeking justice, Patterson had secretly approached Jasper's competitors, offering insider knowledge and political connections in exchange for board positions after a successful acquisition. Tech Fusion Global is interested, Patterson revealed, referring to Reynolds Innovations' largest competitor. Their CEO, Stuart Williams, believes Reynolds' focus on the airline situation creates vulnerability in their core business. They're prepared to commit substantial resources toward acquiring controlling interest. Whitney shifted uncomfortably. I agreed to fight for our jobs, Lawrence. This sounds like something different. It's all connected, Patterson assured her smoothly. Reynolds destroyed our livelihoods based on a perceived slight. Justice requires proportional consequences. What Patterson didn't share was how desperate his personal situation had become. The investigation had frozen his assets, revealed his brother-in-law's catering kickback scheme, and uncovered offshore accounts containing millions in unexplained funds. If Reynolds maintained control of Horizon, criminal charges became increasingly likely. Meanwhile, the campaign to undermine Jasper's credibility accelerated. Private investigators approached Jasper's former classmates, neighborhood acquaintances, and ex-employees, offering substantial payments for damaging information. When legitimate dirt proved scarce, selective editing and decontextualization created the appearance of controversy. A former MIT classmate's comment that Jasper was intensely focused, sometimes forgetting social niceties when deep in coding, became antisocial behavior raised concerns among peers. A neighborhood shopkeeper's recollection that teenage Jasper kept to himself, always reading instead of hanging out, transformed into displayed loner tendencies that worried community members. These manufactured controversies received prominent coverage in outlets sympathetic to Patterson's cause, creating a cloud of suspicion around Jasper's character despite their flimsy substantiation. The resistance campaign achieved its first significant victory when Senator Harrison called for congressional hearings on corporate governance concerns when billion-dollar acquisitions occur without regulatory review. The announcement temporarily depressed Reynolds Innovations stock by 7%, a development that delighted Tech Fusion executives circling for acquisition opportunities. Whitney's media ubiquity made her the resistance movement's public face. Morning shows, cable news interviews, and viral social media clips portrayed her as the sympathetic victim of corporate overreach. Her tears, always perfectly timed, seemed genuinely moving to viewers unaware of the documented discrimination and food safety violations. I dedicated my life to passenger safety and comfort, she insisted during a particularly effective interview. One passenger's complaint, no matter how wealthy or powerful, shouldn't erase decades of exemplary service. The interviewer, either uninformed or deliberately avoiding harder questions, failed to ask about the moldy food, discriminatory comments, or pattern of similar complaints against her. Instead, the segment concluded with information about the legal defense fund established for the terminated crew members. Patterson monitored these developments with growing satisfaction. His strategy relied on wearing down Jasper's resolve through constant attacks from multiple directions: legal harassment, media criticism, business distractions, and political pressure. Eventually, he calculated, accepting a settlement that restored Patterson's position would become the path of least resistance. What Patterson failed to appreciate was his opponent's fundamental nature. Growing up, black in America had given Jasper Reynolds decades of experience withstanding precisely this type of multilateral pressure. His entire life had prepared him for this battle. And while Patterson focused on public relations warfare, Jasper was methodically assembling evidence that would make the resistance's carefully constructed narrative collapse entirely. 60 days after the incident, Jasper Reynolds called for a press conference. Speculation ran rampant about his purpose. Some believed he might announce selling Horizon Airlines to end the controversy. Others expected him to address Whitney's wrongful termination lawsuit. A few suggested he might be stepping back from public life altogether after weeks of aggressive media attacks. The venue itself sparked curiosity. He had chosen Horizon Airlines' largest maintenance hangar at San Francisco International Airport rather than corporate headquarters or a neutral location. Journalists arriving found rows of chairs facing a simple podium, with large screens mounted on either side. No corporate logos, promotional materials, or typical press conference trappings were visible. Precisely at 10 o'clock a.m., Jasper walked onto the stage alone. No attorneys, PR team, or corporate executives flanking him. His appearance surprised many who expected to see the toll of recent events reflected physically. Instead, he looked remarkably composed in a simple charcoal suit, his expression neither triumphant nor defensive. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady and unhurried. "I've called this press conference not to make announcements but to present evidence. For the past 2 months, a coordinated campaign has attempted to reframe what happened aboard Horizon Airlines Flight 457. Today, that ends." The screens activated, displaying a split image. On one side, the moldy bread from Jasper's meal. On the other, laboratory results confirming multiple bacterial contaminations. "What you're seeing is the food I was served in Horizon's first-class cabin 2 months ago. FDA testing confirmed dangerous levels of multiple bacteria consistent with improper storage and handling. For someone with my medical history, this wasn't merely unappetizing. It was potentially lethal." He advanced to the next slide. Internal Horizon documents showing the Patterson Priority Index algorithm that explicitly incorporated race as a factor in service quality determination. This proprietary passenger rating system explicitly downgraded travelers based partly on race and ethnicity, affecting everything from meal freshness to service attentiveness. My score, despite platinum status and first-class booking, placed me in the bottom tier, ensuring I received the oldest food and minimal attention. Gasps rippled through the assembled journalists as the implications became clear. This wasn't subjective interpretation, but documented corporate policy. Jasper continued methodically presenting evidence. Internal emails showing Patterson personally intervening to bury discrimination complaints. Maintenance records revealing safety shortcuts on aircraft primarily serving diverse communities. Catering facility inspection reports showing critical violations systematically ignored. What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident or service failure. It was the predictable outcome of systematic discrimination institutionalized under Lawrence Patterson's leadership. The screens shifted to video footage. Dozens of clips showing Whitney Cameron and other crew members providing markedly different service levels to passengers based on apparent race and perceived status. Side-by-side comparisons showed white passengers receiving warm greetings and attentive service, while passengers of color experienced cursory interactions and delayed responses. Whitney Cameron has portrayed herself as an innocent victim of corporate overreach, Jasper noted calmly. These videos, spanning 3 years of flights, demonstrate consistent discriminatory behavior long predating our interaction. Most damning was security footage from Horizon's catering facility showing staff explicitly marking meal carts with coded indicators for different passenger categories. Training materials explained the system. Gold star for Priority A passengers, predominantly white executives, yellow for Standard passengers, and red for Basic Attention passengers, disproportionately travelers of color regardless of ticket class or status. Jasper then addressed the attempts to damage his reputation directly. "Lawrence Patterson has spent millions attempting to discredit me rather than addressing the documented discrimination within his organization. His campaign isn't about justice for terminated employees. It's about avoiding personal liability for years of corporate malfeasance. The screens displayed financial records showing Patterson's brother-in-law receiving millions through the catering contract despite delivering substandard food. Offshore accounts containing funds that forensic accountants had traced to embezzled Horizon operational budgets, and evidence of Patterson offering bribes to regulatory officials investigating food safety violations. Most disturbing, Jasper continued, is evidence that Patterson and several board members were systematically deteriorating service quality and safety standards while artificially inflating short-term profits. Their documented plan was to eventually bankrupt the airline for insurance payouts while protecting their personal assets. This revelation sent reporters frantically typing on phones and laptops. The story had suddenly transformed from disputed workplace termination to potential criminal conspiracy. The press conference's final segment addressed the fired crew's counterclaims directly. Jasper played unedited recordings of Whitney's discriminatory comments aboard Flight 457. Followed by her contradictory statements during media appearances. The juxtaposition was devastating to her credibility. "I understand that losing employment is difficult," Jasper acknowledged. "However, when that employment involves systematically discriminating against passengers and serving potentially dangerous food based partly on race, termination isn't merely appropriate, it's the minimum acceptable response." He concluded by introducing Angela Martinez, newly appointed permanent CEO of Horizon Airlines and former head of consumer protection at the Department of Transportation. Horizon Airlines is being fundamentally transformed into an organization where safety, excellence, and equal treatment aren't aspirational marketing slogans, but operational requirements with accountability at every level. We're establishing industry-leading standards that will become a model for aviation worldwide. As questions erupted from journalists, the screens displayed one final image, a website address where the complete investigation findings, documentation, and evidence had been published for public review. "Complete transparency is the only path forward," Jasper explained. "I invite everyone to examine the evidence themselves rather than relying on carefully crafted narratives from either side." The press conference's impact was immediate and seismic. #HorizonExposed began trending within minutes. News organizations scrambled to analyze the massive evidence cache now publicly available. Former passengers came forward in droves, sharing similar experiences, creating a damning pattern impossible to dismiss as isolated incidents. Whitney Cameron abruptly canceled scheduled media appearances. Lawrence Patterson's attorney issued a brief statement that their client would not be commenting due to potential legal proceedings. Senator Harrison quietly withdrew his call for congressional hearings. By evening, public opinion had shifted dramatically. Polls showed over 85% supporting Jasper's actions after reviewing the evidence. Lawrence Patterson's carefully constructed counter-narrative had collapsed under the weight of documented facts. Most significantly, the Department of Justice announced a formal investigation into potential civil rights violations, fraud, and criminal negligence at Horizon Airlines under the previous leadership. For Jasper Reynolds, vindication wasn't about personal satisfaction, but establishing that accountability applies equally regardless of one's position or connections. The systems designed to protect discrimination would face their own reckoning. As he left the press conference, a young black flight attendant from the New Horizon team approached him quietly. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing what others pretended not to see, and for doing what others lacked the courage to do." Her words captured the essence of his actions better than any press statement could have. 6 months after the revelations that rocked the aviation industry, Horizon Airlines had undergone a metamorphosis so complete that passengers familiar with its previous incarnation might have believed they'd boarded the wrong carrier. The physical transformation, new aircraft interiors, redesigned uniforms, updated branding, merely hinted at the fundamental operational and cultural changes implemented under Jasper Reynolds' oversight. The executive offices that once housed Lawrence Patterson's inner circle now featured a diverse leadership team recruited from across the aviation industry and beyond. CEO Angela Martinez had assembled executives specifically selected for both technical excellence and demonstrated commitment to equitable practices. Our mission extended beyond fixing one airline, Jasper explained during a rare interview 6 months after the incident. We needed to establish a new standard for the entire industry, proof that excellence and equality aren't competing values, but complementary requirements. That mission had manifested in the Reynolds Standard, a comprehensive framework for service quality, safety protocols, and anti-discrimination practices now being voluntarily adopted by other airlines seeking to avoid Horizon's previous fate. The standard's core innovation wasn't its specific policies, but its unprecedented transparency and accountability mechanisms. Every Horizon flight now featured anonymous passenger feedback specifically addressing equal treatment metrics. These results were published weekly rather than hidden in corporate databases. Employee evaluations incorporated these metrics prominently, with bonuses tied directly to consistent excellence in equitable service delivery. The transformation extended to every operational aspect. The catering facilities that once categorized meals by passenger priority had been completely overhauled, with new FDA-approved protocols ensuring identical quality standards for all passengers regardless of status or appearance. Independent inspectors conducted random testing, with results publicly available on the airline's transparency portal. Most revolutionary was the crew training program developed in partnership with civil rights organizations and aviation safety experts. Beyond typical service training, Horizon implemented evidence-based anti-bias education reinforced through regular simulation exercises and peer accountability systems. We're not interested in superficial diversity initiatives or performative inclusion, CEO Martinez explained during an industry conference. Our approach focuses on measurable outcomes, not intentions. Either all passengers receive equal safety standards and service quality, or we've failed, regardless of how well-meaning our staff might be. The results spoke for themselves. Customer satisfaction scores had risen dramatically across all demographic categories. On-time performance improved as resources previously directed toward preferential treatment of select passengers were distributed more efficiently. Most tellingly, employee satisfaction reached unprecedented levels as staff reported greater professional fulfillment in an environment where excellence rather than bias determined advancement. Whitney Cameron and several crew members from Flight 457 had undergone their own transformations, though less voluntarily. After the evidence presented at Jasper's press conference thoroughly discredited their discrimination claims, Whitney made a public apology acknowledging her actions. "I didn't recognize how my behavior reflected deeply ingrained biases," she admitted during a television interview that differed markedly from her previous appearances. The system encouraged and rewarded those biases while providing plausible deniability about their impact. Several terminated crew members similarly acknowledged their participation in discriminatory practices, attributing their behavior to a toxic culture established under Patterson's leadership. These admissions came partly from genuine reflection, but primarily from legal necessity. The Department of Justice investigation had created potential liability far beyond lost employment. Lawrence Patterson faced more severe consequences. Federal prosecutors had filed multiple charges, including wire fraud, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. His brother-in-law had accepted a plea deal, providing testimony about the catering contract kickback scheme. Multiple board members had similarly turned state's evidence to reduce their own liability, leaving Patterson isolated legally and personally. The aviation industry itself had undergone significant soul-searching. Other airlines proactively audited their service practices, uncovering similar if less formalized patterns of differential treatment. Industry associations established new certification standards incorporating the Reynolds Standard's key elements, particularly around food safety protocols and anti-discrimination practices. Jasper had testified before Congress, providing insights into how seemingly isolated incidents often reflect systemic issues when properly investigated. His testimony helped shape new legislation strengthening anti-discrimination protections in public accommodations and transportation services. The most important outcome isn't punitive but transformative, Jasper explained during his congressional appearance. Consequences create necessary accountability, but lasting change requires reimagining systems rather than merely punishing individuals. This philosophy informed his establishment of the Reynolds Transportation Equity Foundation, funded with $50 million to support research, training, and advocacy addressing discrimination in all transportation sectors. The foundation provided resources for smaller carriers to implement bias training and accountability systems they might otherwise consider financially prohibitive. On the anniversary of Flight 457, Jasper boarded a Horizon Airlines plane bound for Chicago, a deliberate choice to experience the transformed organization firsthand. As he settled into Suite 1A, he observed the crew's interactions with every passenger, noting the consistent courtesy, attentiveness, and professionalism extended regardless of appearance, accent, or perceived status. Captain Diana Chen personally greeted first-class passengers without the selective warmth that had characterized Captain Bennett's approach. Flight attendant Michael Okafor provided identical service standards to each traveler, maintaining the same respectful demeanor whether addressing the elderly Jamaican grandmother in 14C or the white executive in 2A. When meal service began, Jasper noted the meticulous attention to his documented food allergies without his needing to remind the crew. The presentation, quality, and safety standards matched those provided to every passenger, differentiating only based on cabin class rather than individual passenger categorization. As the flight progressed smoothly toward Chicago, Jasper reflected on how a single meal, moldy bread served to the wrong passenger, had catalyzed transformation extending far beyond one airline or flight crew. The incident crystallized patterns of discrimination typically dismissed as isolated misunderstandings, creating undeniable evidence of systemic issues typically hidden behind plausible deniability and institutional protection. The true measure of success wasn't Jasper's personal vindication or even Patterson's legal consequences, but the thousands of passengers who would never know what they hadn't experienced. The subtle indignities, differential treatment, and safety compromises that once characterized air travel for those who didn't fit preconceived notions of premium passenger. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, Jasper glanced at his fellow passengers, diverse in every conceivable dimension but united in receiving the respect, safety, and service that should always have been standard rather than selective. In that moment, he recognized that sometimes transformation requires not just identifying broken systems, but having the courage and capability to rebuild them entirely. Jasper Reynolds' story teaches us that systemic discrimination often hides behind plausible deniability until someone powerful enough challenges it. While not everyone has billions to purchase an airline, we all possess the ability to document unfair treatment and demand accountability. True change requires more than addressing individual behaviors. It demands examining the systems that encourage and reward discrimination while providing cover for those who practice it. When institutions prioritize certain people based on appearance rather than merit, they don't just harm individuals. They poison entire organizational cultures and compromise quality for everyone. Jasper's transformation of Horizon Airlines demonstrates that excellence and equality aren't competing values, but complementary requirements for genuine success. Perhaps most importantly, this story reminds us that what appears as an isolated incident to some represents a familiar pattern to others. The differential treatment Jasper experienced wasn't exceptional but extraordinarily well documented, forcing a reckoning typically avoided through denial, minimization, and victim blaming. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination while traveling? Would you speak up, document it like Jasper, or stay silent? If this story inspired you to stand up against unfair treatment, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful true stories. Share this video if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment regardless of appearance or background. Comment below with your own experiences facing or witnessing discrimination in customer service settings. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the most powerful changes start with simply refusing to accept the unacceptable.